Lena moved quietly around the living room, her hands busy tidying the scattered cushions, dusting the shelves and straightening picture frames, each motion almost automatic, yet her mind raced with thoughts she didn't fully understand, thoughts of the changes in her life over the past year, of how she had come to care deeply for Michael, her stepson, in ways that surprised her, though never inappropriately, simply as someone who had grown close to a young man trying to find his place in the world, a boy on the edge of adulthood who carried both curiosity and uncertainty in his gaze. And as she reached to pick up a stray sock that had fallen near the sofa, she felt the sunlight spill across the floor, warm and golden, highlighting the tiny dust motes floating lazily in the air, and she realized how quiet the house had become, how each little sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the soft rustle of pages from a magazine left on the coffee table, seemed amplified in the peaceful afternoon. Yet despite the calm, there was an almost tangible tension lingering in the air, the kind that comes when someone is about to say something meaningful, something that might shift the rhythm of ordinary life just enough to leave an impression. And just as she set the last cushion in place, she heard a soft clearing of a throat behind her, and her heart skipped a beat, an unfamiliar flutter that was both exciting and nerve-wracking, and she turned, slowly, to see Michael leaning against the doorway, his posture hesitant, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes searching hers with a mixture of curiosity and vulnerability, and for a moment she froze, unsure what he would say, her hand still mid-air, dusting brush poised as if suspended in time, the afternoon sunlight casting shadows across his face, highlighting the seriousness of his expression, the faint tension around his lips and the slight furrow of his brow, which made her realize just how much he was growing up, how quickly the boy she had known was transforming into a thoughtful young man with questions she hadn't anticipated. And then he spoke, his voice quiet, careful, tinged with both hesitation and courage. "Lena, can I ask you something?" And those words, simple yet loaded with meaning, sent a rush of emotion through her, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and a gentle warmth she couldn't quite name, and she found herself nodding slowly, brushing off the flutter in her chest, whispering softly, "Of course," even though her mind was suddenly alive with possibilities, wondering what he might say, what he might need, what truth he might be seeking in this small, ordinary moment. And as he stepped a little further into the room, the light catching in his hair, the quiet determination in his eyes, Lena realized that life had a way of delivering unexpected questions at the most ordinary times, questions that could shift the balance of emotions, reveal hidden feelings, and connect hearts in ways that neither time nor planning could predict. And in that moment, as she watched him hesitate, waiting for her reaction, she felt a surge of protectiveness and care, a deep awareness of the bond they were building, a mixture of gentle affection and a profound emotional closeness that went beyond simple words, and she understood, without him needing to explain, that this was a pivotal moment, a fragile opening where honesty and connection might bloom if nurtured with patience and empathy. And so she straightened her posture, met his gaze steadily, and whispered again, "Of course," ready to listen, ready to share in the unspoken understanding that sometimes the simplest moments, like tidying up the living room, sunlight pouring through the windows, a soft question asked at just the right time, could carry the weight of emotions that words alone could never fully express. And with that quiet agreement hanging in the air, Lena felt the subtle shift of anticipation, a soft, unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together, in that warm, sunlit living room, amidst the familiar sights of a home slowly taking shape under their care. And as Michael drew a small step closer, her heart beat a little faster, mind alert, spirit open, fully aware that this ordinary afternoon had suddenly become extraordinary, a turning point in the quiet, intricate dance of their growing connection, a moment where curiosity, care, and the gentle stirrings of emotion intertwined, leaving Lena both apprehensive and strangely exhilarated at what he might ask and what it might reveal. And as she prepared herself to listen, to respond with patience, understanding, and warmth, she couldn't help but feel that life had, in its quiet way, just offered her a moment she would remember for years to come, the kind of moment that makes the mundane magical, where dusting shelves and straightening cushions becomes a backdrop for hearts opening, for emotions that had been unspoken, untested, and waiting quietly for the right moment to be seen, understood, and acknowledged. And as Michael's hesitant eyes met hers once more, Lena realized with a tender, almost aching awareness that this small question, asked while she was tidying up, might be the beginning of a conversation that would change the way they saw each other, deepening a bond she had always hoped for but never imagined could feel so immediate, so delicate, and yet so profound. Michael stepped further into the living room. His movements careful, almost hesitant, as if every step carried the weight of something important he needed to say, and Lena, still holding the dusting brush in her hand, watched him closely, sensing the unusual seriousness in his demeanor, the quiet tension in the air that made her pulse quicken, a combination of curiosity and concern keeping her rooted in place as he finally stopped near the center of the room, hands loosely at his sides, shoulders slightly slumped in a way that made him seem younger, and yet more mature at the same time, and she could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, the kind of uncertainty that comes when someone is about to share something deeply personal, something that had been held back, perhaps for fear of judgment or misunderstanding, and for a moment the room felt impossibly still, the sunlight falling in soft golden streaks across the floor and furniture, highlighting the intensity of the moment and the subtle expressions crossing his face, the slight twitch of his lips, the way his brow furrowed lightly as he gathered his thoughts, and then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate, carrying a sincerity that made Lena pause mid-motion. "Do you ever feel like you're not really seen?" he asked, and the question, simple yet profound, seemed to hang in the warm afternoon air, stretching the space between them with a delicate tension, and Lena felt a strange flutter in her chest, a mix of surprise, empathy, and a gentle warmth that reminded her how much she had come to care for him, not as someone to guide or discipline, but as a person whose heart and thoughts mattered to her deeply, and she realized instantly that this was more than a casual question, more than idle curiosity. It was a window into his inner world, an invitation to connect, to acknowledge feelings that had perhaps been overlooked, ignored, or unspoken for too long, and as she knelt slowly beside the couch, setting down the brush to give him her full attention, she felt her own emotions swell with tenderness, with a bittersweet ache born of recognition, understanding, and the subtle, unspoken bond that had been growing quietly between them over months of shared laughter, small gestures of kindness, and the simple rhythms of everyday life that had slowly intertwined their worlds. And she looked at him, meeting his gaze steadily, seeing the mixture of vulnerability and hope, and whispered softly, "I sometimes feel that way," her words carrying more weight than she intended, but entirely honest, and as she spoke, she noticed the tension in his shoulders ease slightly, the careful hesitance in his posture softening as if her acknowledgement had offered a balm he hadn't realized he needed, and in that moment, the ordinary living room transformed into a sacred space of understanding, of hearts quietly reaching for one another, a place where emotions that were often hidden could be voiced and received without fear, judgment, or pretense, and she saw in his expression a flicker of relief, a tiny smile forming that spoke of trust, gratitude, and the fragile courage it took to reveal one's inner thoughts. And Lena felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest, a combination of pride, protectiveness, and gentle affection, the kind of feeling that reminded her how human connections could be simultaneously delicate and powerful, and how even the simplest questions, asked at the right moment, could open doors to understanding and intimacy that nothing else could. And she realized that this question, this brief, vulnerable inquiry, was not just about being seen, but about recognition, about the silent need for someone to witness the complexity of emotions swirling inside, to acknowledge both fear and hope, and she felt compelled to lean slightly closer, to show through presence alone that she was listening, that she cared, that she understood. And Michael, encouraged by her calm, steady attention, took a small step forward, the tension in his hands and jaw easing, his eyes brightening with a mixture of relief and tentative joy, and he spoke again, hesitating, testing the waters of connection. "It's just, sometimes I feel like no one notices the little things I do or understands why I do them." And Lena nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deeply within her own heart, remembering her own moments of invisibility, of longing for someone to truly see her, and she reached out instinctively, brushing a stray strand of hair from his face with gentle fingers, a simple gesture that conveyed empathy, warmth, and encouragement without words. And Michael's lips curved in a slight, almost shy smile, and she realized in that instant how significant these moments of recognition could be, how powerful the act of listening, of witnessing another person's inner world, could become. And the living room, filled with sunlight and shadows, seemed to hold its breath, carrying the weight of unspoken understanding, and Lena felt her chest tighten with an almost overwhelming tenderness, a combination of compassion and admiration for the young man before her, who was simultaneously so brave and so fragile, and she found herself speaking again softly. "I see you, Michael. I notice you. You're not invisible to me." And the words, though gentle, held a gravity that made him blink in surprise, a subtle awe in his expression, and he whispered back almost too softly to hear, "Thank you, that means more than I can say." And Lena's heart swelled, realizing that in these small, ordinary moments, amid the routine of dusting shelves and tidying cushions, something extraordinary was unfolding, a connection deepening, a bridge forming between two hearts that trusted each other enough to be seen, truly seen, for the first time. And as the afternoon waned, the golden light shifting and stretching across the room, she knew that this simple, unexpected question had changed the atmosphere of their home, had opened a space for honesty, vulnerability, and the gentle warmth of emotional intimacy, the kind that stays with you long after the words have been spoken. And she felt an unspoken promise linger in the air, a quiet understanding that they had taken a step toward each other, toward mutual respect, trust, and care, and that even in the simplest of moments, profound emotional bonds could be forged, leaving her heart lighter, her mind full of tender thoughts, and her spirit quietly exhilarated by the realization that connection could appear in the most unexpected ways, sparked by a question asked softly while tidying up, carrying with it the promise of deeper understanding, unspoken support, and the quiet beauty of being truly noticed. That evening, after the warm glow of the sunset faded and the house settled into a calm quiet, Lena found herself in the kitchen, wiping down the counters and stacking dishes, her movements methodical but her mind alive with thoughts of Michael and the earlier conversation, the way he had spoken with such quiet honesty, revealing feelings he rarely expressed. And she realized that the ordinary rhythm of daily chores had suddenly become charged with meaning, each action echoing with a heightened awareness of connection, of emotions lingering just beneath the surface. And as she reached for the tea kettle, she noticed Michael standing in the doorway, hesitant, hands tucked into his pockets, shoulders slightly slouched, the familiar uncertainty in his posture softened by a courage she had seen spark in his eyes earlier. And she watched him approach slowly, carrying something in his hand, a folded piece of paper that seemed small but significant, the kind of note that might hold thoughts he couldn't yet voice aloud. And when he finally placed it on the counter, he looked at her with a quiet intensity, waiting for her to notice, waiting for her to acknowledge the courage it had taken to share even this small token of his inner world. And Lena's heart tightened with a mixture of anticipation and tenderness, realizing that this moment, simple, ordinary yet profound, was one of those rare occasions where lives intersect in ways that feel both fragile and monumental. And she unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing it with gentle fingers as if the words themselves deserved reverence. And she read his handwriting, neat but with slight tremors in the letters, each line carrying emotion, carrying the weight of his experience, his longing to be understood and seen. And the words themselves were simple, yet they struck her with the force of sincerity. "I know we're still learning to understand each other, but I feel like I can tell you anything. You make this house feel like a home. Thank you for that." Lena's chest ached with a warmth that was both sweet and slightly painful, the kind of emotional swell that comes from recognizing someone's heart laid bare. And she realized that in his note, Michael had given her a gift far greater than mere words. He had given trust, connection, and a glimpse into the vulnerable space he carried inside him, the place where longing for acknowledgement and understanding had quietly resided. And she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness but of a gentle, heartfelt recognition, a mixture of pride, protectiveness, and deep affection for the young man who had grown in her life, who had become someone she cared for in a profound and meaningful way. And as she folded the note carefully and held it close, she thought of all the little moments that had led to this point, the small conversations, the shared laughter, the quiet evenings spent in ordinary routines that had slowly built a bridge of connection, allowing vulnerability to be safe, allowing hearts to meet without pretense. And she looked up at him, meeting his eyes, and saw in them a flicker of hope, of relief, of unspoken gratitude. And she knew that her response would carry weight far beyond the simple words she might say, that her acknowledgement, her gentle presence, her steady, attentive gaze, could reinforce the bond of trust he had just offered. And she smiled softly, a warmth radiating from her heart, and spoke in a voice low and tender. "Michael, I feel the same way. I notice you, I care, and I'm grateful for you too." And his lips curved in a shy but genuine smile, a quiet lifting of tension from his shoulders, a subtle but unmistakable signal that he felt seen, acknowledged, and valued. And in that simple exchange, Lena realized that life often unfolds its most profound moments not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the quiet, understated acts of honesty and connection, in the courage to offer one's heart, however small, and the willingness to receive it with empathy and care. And as they stood there together, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the neighborhood outside serving as the backdrop, Lena felt an almost overwhelming sense of gratitude for this ordinary evening transformed into something extraordinary, a moment where words carried the weight of sincerity, trust, and emotional intimacy, a moment where the bridge between two hearts was strengthened by the delicate threads of understanding, and she realized that this fragile, tender connection was not fleeting, but something that could grow, something that could shape the rhythm of their daily lives, guiding them toward deeper trust, more meaningful conversations, and the kind of quiet emotional resonance that lingers long after the words are spoken. And as Michael lingered, still holding her gaze, she sensed that this was the beginning of a chapter in their relationship marked not by grand drama, but by subtle, enduring warmth, the gentle promise of hearts opening safely to each other, a connection that was heartfelt, sincere, and profoundly human. And Lena felt a quiet thrill, a gentle rush of emotion that made the mundane act of wiping a counter or folding a piece of paper feel monumental, knowing that love, care, and understanding could take root in the smallest gestures. And in that evening glow, amidst the quiet comfort of their shared home, Lena and Michael both understood, without needing to say more, that the act of being truly seen and understood was perhaps the greatest gift of all, a gift that would shape their days, their interactions, and the deepening bond they were nurturing, a bond built not on obligation or routine, but on trust, openness, and the courage to share pieces of themselves that had long waited for recognition. And Lena, heart full, eyes glistening, knew that this note, this simple act, would remain with her forever, a quiet beacon of emotional intimacy, a tender reminder that even the smallest moments can carry the weight of profound human connection, and that sometimes the act of listening, acknowledging, and responding with care is the truest expression of love, support, and presence one can offer. And as she looked at Michael one last time before returning to her chores, she smiled inwardly, knowing that their lives had shifted subtly but meaningfully, that the ordinary could indeed become extraordinary, and that the trust and warmth shared in this quiet evening would continue to echo in their hearts for a long time to come. The next morning, the house was bathed in soft golden light, sunlight spilling through the windows and casting gentle shadows across the living room where Lena and Michael sat side by side, each holding a warm cup of tea, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and faint sounds of birds outside creating a peaceful backdrop that made the ordinary feel sacred. And Lena felt a calm warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, tenderness, and quiet joy that lingered from the heartfelt exchange of the previous evening, the note Michael had given her still fresh in her mind, its simple words echoing in her heart, reminding her how profoundly small gestures could affect emotions and shape connections. And as she glanced at him, she noticed the subtle changes in his expression, the softness in his eyes, the faint curve of a smile, the way he seemed a little taller, more assured, as if the vulnerability he had shown yesterday had strengthened him in ways words could not fully capture. And she realized that life was often like this, quietly transformative, giving moments of clarity and connection amidst the mundane routines that often pass unnoticed. And Michael, sensing her gaze, met her eyes with a mixture of shyness and sincerity, a quiet understanding passing between them without the need for words, the kind of silent acknowledgement that spoke of trust, respect, and a bond that had grown stronger through openness and honesty. And Lena's thoughts drifted to how much she had come to care for him, not in a fleeting or superficial way, but in a deeply human, nurturing sense, a heartfelt attachment born from shared moments, empathy, and mutual recognition. And she realized that even small acts of courage, like asking a question, writing a note, or speaking honestly, could open doors to understanding and intimacy, doors that remained closed for too long when fear or hesitation took over. And as Michael shifted slightly in his seat, adjusting his hands around the warm cup, he spoke softly, almost as if testing the safety of the moment. I'm glad you understood. I was nervous about telling you, but now I feel lighter. And Lena nodded, her own heart echoing his sentiment, understanding that acknowledging another's feelings, responding with empathy, and being fully present in a moment of honesty could ease burdens in ways nothing else could. And she smiled gently, her eyes meeting his, the connection between them deepening in the quiet morning light. a subtle but powerful thread weaving their emotions together in a way that felt natural, enduring, and profoundly human. And as she sipped her tea, she reflected on the months leading up to this moment. The laughter, the small conversations, the occasional disagreements, the shared meals, and the simple routines that had built a foundation for trust and care. Realizing that these seemingly ordinary experiences had prepared them for this kind of heartfelt connection. A moment where vulnerability was met with kindness, and where understanding became a bridge linking two hearts. A bridge that could support honesty, warmth, and emotional closeness without demanding more than what each was willing to give. And Michael, encouraged by her calm and attentive presence, added quietly, "I think I can talk to you about almost anything now. I feel like you really see me." And Lena felt a surge of warmth and gratitude, recognizing the significance of his words, understanding that being truly seen, fully acknowledged and understood, was one of the most profound gifts they could offer one another, and she replied with the softest sincerity, "I see you, Michael. I always will." And in that gentle exchange, the morning transformed from ordinary to extraordinary, a quiet ceremony of trust and connection that neither would forget. And as they continued to sit together, sipping tea and letting the silence carry meaning, Lena noticed how the sunlight shifted across the room, how the shadows lengthened and softened, creating an atmosphere that seemed to reflect the gentle unfolding of their bond, a bond strengthened by honesty, empathy, and the courage to share feelings that had long remained unspoken. And she thought of the future, imagining countless ordinary mornings like this one, where simple gestures, open conversations, and the quiet presence of one another would continue to deepen the trust and warmth between them, shaping their interactions, their memories, and their understanding of what it meant to be connected in a meaningful human way. And she realized that emotional intimacy did not require dramatic events, sweeping declarations, or grand gestures, but could grow steadily, nurtured by everyday acts of attention, listening, and acknowledgement. And she felt her chest swell with gratitude for this unfolding connection, knowing that these small, tender moments, sharing tea, exchanging smiles, sitting side by side in silence, were the foundation of lasting emotional resonance, the kind of connection that lingers long after words fade. And Michael, sensing the comfort and acceptance in her gaze, relaxed further, allowing himself to savor the safety and warmth of the moment, the unspoken understanding that they had created together. And Lena reflected on how far they had come, from tentative questions and quiet conversations to a deep, meaningful bond that carried both trust and care, a bond that promised to grow and endure through challenges, changes, and the passage of time. And as the morning stretched on, filled with soft light and gentle energy, she felt a serene joy, a quiet excitement at the unfolding journey of connection and understanding they were embarking on. A journey built not on obligation or expectation, but on the profound human desire to be seen, acknowledged, and cherished. And in that moment, with the sunlight warming the room, tea cooling in their hands, and hearts quietly aligned in trust and empathy, Lena and Michael both understood that this was more than a fleeting exchange. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to open one's heart had created a lasting, heartfelt bond, a bond that would continue to grow and shape their lives, filling ordinary mornings with extraordinary meaning, and leaving both of them with the gentle, unshakable certainty that the simple act of listening, of being present, and of truly seeing another human being was one of life's greatest gifts, a gift they had given each other in the soft light of a quiet morning, and one they would carry forward, nurturing it with patience, understanding, and the tender care that only comes from hearts willing to connect fully, honestly, and deeply in the everyday moments that make life truly remarkable.